Imagine standing on the center stage of the Dolby Theater.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure right there.
Right. I mean, you are looking out at the most famous faces on the planet. And you are holding a gold statue, making absolute global history as the first K-pop artist to ever win an Academy Award.
It's a massive moment.
It is. So you lean into the microphone, you start speaking about the profound nature of resilience, and suddenly
Oh, this was hard to watch.
the floor literally swallows your microphone. Like, it retracts right into the stage, the lights drop to pitch black, and the orchestra just completely drowns you out. Welcome to the 2026 Oscars.
Yeah, I mean, it is the ultimate collision between this pristine Hollywood illusion and the brutal, unforgiving reality of a live television broadcast.
Absolutely. And we are so thrilled you're joining us for this deep dive today because we are putting the 98th Academy Awards under a microscope.
And there is so much to unpack here.
Oh, definitely. If you caught the broadcast, it delivered the expected glamour.
Yeah.
But what you might have missed in the blur of that, 3-hour telecast is that this night actually functioned as a massive stress test for the entire film industry.
Yeah, it really was.
We witnessed history-making firsts that dismantled decades of systemic bias, unscripted logistical nightmares that pushed the control room to the absolute brink, and just a fascinating look at how an institution that's approaching its 100th anniversary handles a rapidly shifting global culture.
Right, because this wasn't just an award show, it was a real-time cultural audit.
I love that phrase, cultural audit.
Exactly. What makes these specific Oscars so compelling is the friction, right? The tension between recognizing artists who have been historically rendered invisible and an antiquated broadcast architecture that physically cannot handle the weight of that progress.
And we are not here to just read you a sterile list of winners and losers.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look that up on your phone.
That's boring.
We want to take you inside the actual mechanisms of the night. Like, how does a director in a broadcast truck actually handle a mathematical anomaly, like an exact voting tie on live television?
Which is just mathematically insane.
Insane. And why did it take nearly a century to give casting directors a trophy? Plus, how do the subtle choices of a late-night host disarm a room full of the most image-conscious human beings alive?
Well, to understand any of that, we really have to look at the psychological temperature of the Dolby Theater before the first envelope was even opened.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's get right into it.
Yeah.
Because if you've ever been to a high-stakes corporate event, you know the energy, right?
Oh yeah, everyone's on edge.
Now multiply that by $1 billion of box office revenue and a room full of people whose entire livelihoods depend on public perception.
Right.
The Academy needed a pressure valve. So they brought back Conan O'Brien for his second consecutive year. And they locked him into a contract just 2 weeks after he hosted the 2025 ceremony.
Which is no time at all to prep.
Zero time. But he didn't just walk out in a tux and wave. He burst onto the stage in full character.
And Gladys.
Yes. Dressed as Aunt Gladys from the horror film Weapons. He is wearing this ghostly white makeup, a glaring red wig, and his very first line is a joke that he looks like Betty Davis with lupus.
It's just a masterclass in calculated status manipulation.
How so?
Well, you have to analyze the audience he's facing, right?
Right.
The people sitting in those front rows spend 364 days a year shielded by publicists.
Right, surrounded by a whole entourage.
Exactly. Assistants telling them they are the absolute center of the cultural universe. So when they sit in that theater, they are deeply, deeply terrified.
Wait, really? Harris?
Oh, absolutely. They are terrified of losing, of becoming a meme, of saying the wrong thing. I mean, the air is practically vibrating with narcissism and anxiety.
So Conan walks out looking completely absurd to counter that.
Exactly. He mathematically lowers his own status below everyone else in the room by coming out as Aunt Gladys and then later in his monologue publicly humiliating himself.
Oh, the Rose Byrne thing.
Yeah. By confessing this pathetic, desperate crush on Best Actress nominee Rose Byrne from If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, he essentially volunteers to be the court jester.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because if a host walks out projecting superiority or slickness, their jokes feel like attacks. But when Conan establishes himself as this pathetic, ridiculous figure, his sharper critiques suddenly become palatable. The audience feels safe laughing because the target is off their back.
I want to push on that, though, because he did target people. I mean, he went right after Timothée Chalamet.
He did.
He joked about that recent controversy, saying security was extra tight due to threats from both the opera and ballet communities.
Yeah, that was bold.
And he even joked about Kid Rock hosting an alternate, highly political Oscars down the street at a Dave & Buster's. Like, how do late-night hosts negotiate those specific jabs? Because, Chalamet's publicists were probably sweating bullets.
Oh, they absolutely were. But this is the function of the fool in the theatrical sense, right? Like Shakespeare.
Yeah.
The fool is the only one allowed to tell the king the truth. Conan's jab at Chalamet works because it addresses the elephant in the room, the controversy everyone is whispering about at the Vanity Fair parties.
Right.
But he frames it through this absurd lens. Militant ballet dancers.
Right. Taking the heat out of it.
Exactly. And the Kid Rock joke does the exact same thing. It acknowledges the cultural polarization surrounding award shows, the idea that Hollywood is this out-of-touch coastal elite club, but it places that tension inside a Dave & Buster's.
Which is just a funny visual.
It diffuses a legitimate cultural critique with a completely mundane visual.
And then, after all the jokes, he pulls off this incredibly quiet maneuver. At the very end of his opening remarks, he seamlessly transitions into speaking Spanish.
Yeah, that was fascinating.
It wasn't preceded by a grand speech about unity or anything. He just shifted languages. And in the context of the incredibly heated immigration debates happening in the news that very week, it felt like a nonverbal political statement.
Well, it's the ultimate evolution of award show politics, honestly.
How so?
Historically, hosts have either completely ignored the outside world, which makes the broadcast feel tone deaf, or they halt the show to deliver a 10-minute lecture.
Which alienates half the audience immediately.
Exactly, it makes people change the channel. But Conan's linguistic pivot is brilliant because it forces the audience to lean in. He utilizes a cultural signifier, the Spanish language, to acknowledge the reality outside the theater walls, but he refuses to step onto a soapbox.
Yeah, it acknowledges the tension without breaking the momentum of the entertainment. Which, actually perfectly transitions us to the first major award of the night.
Yeah.
Because this entire ceremony felt like an exercise in finally acknowledging what has historically been ignored.
Yes. The inaugural Best Casting category. This was just a tectonic shift for the Academy.
It was massive. They brought out this powerhouse ensemble to present it.
Yeah.
You had Paul Mescal, Wagner Moura, Gwyneth Paltrow, Delroy Lindo, and Chase Infinite.
The brilliant lineup.
Yeah, a lineup of actors specifically there to honor the people who put them in those roles. And Cassandra Koulikoundis won the historic first Oscar for her work on Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another.
Such a well-deserved win.
But the detail that fascinated me was her backstory. Because she started as an intern, like getting coffee, running scripts, on Anderson's very first feature film, Part 8, 30 years ago.
It is a remarkable narrative of endurance. But to understand why this moment carried such immense weight in the room, we really have to unpack the historical suppression of casting directors in Hollywood.
Because if you think about building a film, I always look at it through the lens of structural engineering.
I like that analogy.
Right, you could have the most brilliant architectural blueprints, the script, and the finest building materials, the cameras and lighting. But if the load-bearing pillars, the actors, don't share the right structural integrity.
It all falls apart.
Exactly. If the lead and the supporting cast don't counterbalance each other perfectly, the entire building collapses the moment the audience steps inside. So why did it take nearly a century for the Academy to recognize the people laying that foundation?
Because casting threatens the myth of the auteur, and it threatens the ego of the producer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In the golden age of the studio system, executives wanted the public to believe that they discovered stars at a soda fountain.
Right, the whole Lana Turner myth.
Exactly. And later on, directors wanted the credit for manifesting a perfect ensemble purely from their own genius. Acknowledging a casting director meant admitting that finding the soul of a character is a distinct, highly specialized skill that the director themselves might not actually possess.
It meant sharing the credit for the alchemy of the movie.
Precisely. And for decades, the industry treated casting not as an art form, but as administrative work.
Like paperwork.
Essentially, yeah. It was viewed as glorified secretarial duties. Coordinating schedules, making phone calls, organizing headshots. And it is not a coincidence that casting has historically been a female-dominated profession within the industry.
Oh, go.
And it is also not a coincidence that it was consequently undervalued and denied a seat at the Academy's table for so long.
So when Koulikoundis gets up there, after 30 years with Paul Thomas Anderson, It completely reframes what casting actually is in front of the whole world.
It reframes it from an administrative task to a lifelong creative partnership. A brilliant casting director like Kulukundi's doesn't just hire famous people. She understands the unspoken, eccentric vernacular of Paul Thomas Anderson's brain.
Right, she speaks his language.
Exactly. She knows the exact tonal frequency his films require, and she spends months reading hundreds of unknown actors to find the one human being who perfectly harmonizes with that frequency.
That's incredible.
So her winning this award isn't just a trophy for a job well done. It is the Academy finally admitting that casting directors are co-authors of the cinematic narrative.
I really love that idea of co-authorship, because that exact same theme, the dismantling of old myths and the demand for co-authorship, played out again, and this time behind the camera.
Yes.
And it happened in a department that has historically been the most impenetrable boys' club in Hollywood.
The cinematography category.
Yes. Autumn Durald-Arkapaw took home Best Cinematography for her phenomenal work on the film Sinners. And she became the first woman and the first woman of color to ever win this specific Oscar.
It was a very heavy moment.
You could literally feel the air leave the room. She gets to the microphone and she specifically highlights a conversation she continually has with her director, Ryan Coogler.
I remember this.
She says, "Whenever I say thank you to Ryan, he replies and says, 'No, thank you for believing in me, and thank you for trusting me.'" And then she asks every woman in the Dolby Theater to stand up.
That physical action, commanding the women to stand, was arguably the most vital imagery of the entire broadcast.
Let's dig into the history here, because I really want to understand the mechanics of why cinematography was the final frontier for women to conquer. I mean, we have had female writers win, female editors, even female directors.
Right.
What is the specific historical barrier with the camera department?
To understand this, you really have to look at the history of Hollywood's technical unions. The camera, grip, and electrical departments evolved out of an industrial, almost militaristic framework in the 1920s and 30s.
Militaristic. Real.
Yes, think about the equipment back then. The massive 35mm film magazines, the heavy arc lamps, the miles of thick copper cabling. It was incredibly heavy, and the hours were brutal. Because of this, the culture on a film set in those specific departments perfectly mirrored a blue-collar construction site or a factory floor.
It was physical labor masquerading as art.
Exactly, and that culture created a closed, fiercely guarded loop. The men in charge hired men they knew from their neighborhoods who trained other men they knew. There was this pervasive, institutionally supported myth that women simply did not possess the physical stamina or the technical fortitude to run a massive camera crew or handle the machinery.
But wait, women were allowed to be editors almost from the very beginning of cinema. Why the distinction there?
Because of how the labor was categorized. Editing in the silent era and early sound era involved literally cutting strips of celluloid and taping or gluing them together.
Okay.
The male-dominated executive suites viewed this as akin to sewing, knitting, or weaving.
Oh my God.
Yes, tasks deemed traditionally female. It was stationary indoor work, but the camera, the literal mechanical eye of the film, was out in the elements. It commanded authority over the entire set, and men refused to yield that authority.
That is mind-blowing.
So Arkapa's victory is not just about her lighting a beautiful film, it is the demolition of a century-old labor barrier.
And that completely recontextualizes why she made the women stand up.
Yes. She wasn't just sharing the applause. She was creating an undeniable visual demographic shift. For decades, the industry excuse for not hiring female cinematographers was, there just aren't any experienced women in the pipeline.
Right, the classic excuse.
Exactly. By forcing them to stand in the light of an international broadcast, she eradicated that excuse. She physically demonstrated that the pipeline is full. The gates were just locked.
I was also really struck by the language she used regarding Ryan Coogler. You know, Coogler telling her, "Thank you for believing in me." That flips the traditional auteur power dynamic completely upside down.
It really does.
Because you usually hear crews thanking the autocratic genius director for granting them the privilege of operating the equipment.
Well, it represents a fundamental evolution in leadership styles among modern filmmakers. The old guard often treated their directors of photography as highly skilled mechanics, just there to execute the director's exact, uncompromising dictates.
Just point the camera where I tell you.
Right. But Coogler's language reveals that he views his DP not as a mechanic, but as an intellectual peer. He requires her lived experience, her cultural perspective, and her specific artistic voice to be infused into the framing of the narrative. He is vulnerable enough to admit that the film relies on her trust in him.
Which is a perfect segue into how Ryan Coogler handled himself the rest of the night. Because Arkapa's win was a major battle in what became the central narrative spine of the telecast.
Oh, absolutely.
The entire ceremony ultimately functioned as a high-stakes showdown between the two defining masterpieces of the year, Sinners and One Battle After Another.
It was a fascinating study in contrast, really two distinct cinematic philosophies splitting the Academy's consensus.
Let's look at how the evening unfolded for both camps. Because Sinners came into the building as the absolute titan, leading with 16 nominations, and it hit hard and early.
It did.
Ryan Coogler took Best Original Screenplay. He gets up there, visibly nervous, worried out loud about the teleprompter clock, and he delivers this fiercely heartfelt speech anchoring himself to Oakland and Richmond, California.
Right.
And just like Arcapa, he makes his entire cast and crew stand up to share the spotlight. Then Ludwig Göransson takes Best Original Score for the film, his third Oscar, by the way, adding to his wins for Black Panther and Oppenheimer.
And Göransson's win rate is historic. It signals a total shift in what the Academy considers prestige film scoring. Moving away from traditional orchestral arrangements to highly synthesized, culturally specific soundscapes.
But as the night wore on, one battle after another quietly, methodically started stacking up the major hardware. It won 6 trophies overall. Andy Jurgensen took Best Film Editing, presented by Bill Pullman and his son Louis.
Yes.
And then came the climax. Paul Thomas Anderson, a filmmaker who's been nominated for decades, finally broke through. He won Best Adapted Screenplay and the incredibly coveted Best Director Award.
Long time coming.
And his speech was shockingly brief. He looked out at the other nominees and simply said, "I couldn't ask for a better class." And then, One Battle takes the ultimate prize. Best Picture, presented by Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman.
What you are witnessing in those acceptance speeches are two entirely different architectural approaches to artistic leadership and triumph.
Okay, break that down for me. How does Coogler's approach differ from Anderson's in those few seconds they have on stage?
Look at their initial impulses. Winning an Oscar is perhaps the most intensely individualistic, isolating moment a human being can experience.
Yeah, it's just you up there.
Exactly. You are alone, elevated above your peers, holding a symbol of personal superiority. Coogler's immediate psychological impulse is to dismantle that isolation. He builds a communal plaza.
I see.
He immediately cites his specific geography, Oakland and Richmond, reminding the global audience of the socioeconomic ecosystem that generated his perspective. By making his crew stand, he decentralizes his own genius. He frames himself as merely the conduit for his community's collective effort.
It's like you saying, "I'm only standing up here because you are sitting right there."
Exactly. Now, observe Paul Thomas Anderson. He represents the quintessential American auteur. He has pursued this specific directing prize for over 20 years.
Right.
Yet, when he finally summits that peak, he doesn't take a victory lap, and he doesn't highlight his crew in the same communal way Coogler does. Instead, he builds a monument to the craft itself.
By calling them a better class.
Yes. By saying, "I couldn't ask for a better class," he connects himself horizontally to the lineage of cinema. He is acknowledging the shared, grueling intellectual struggle of his fellow nominees. So, Coogler's humility is rooted in cultural community. Anderson's humility is rooted in artistic collegiality. Both are profound, but they operate on completely different frequencies.
And I want to pause here to emphasize how rare the mechanics of this split actually are for you listening.
Yeah.
Because in the era of the preferential ballot, the Oscars are almost always defined by a sweeping consensus.
Usually, yes.
Right, one movie catches the cultural zeitgeist, and the voters rubber stamp it down the line. Picture, director, screenplay, editing. The runner-up is usually left completely devastated.
Sweeps are the norm.
But the preferential voting system, where voters rank the films from 1 to 10, actually functioned perfectly this year to validate two distinct visions. Sinners took screenplay, cinematography, and score. One Battle took director, picture, and editing. It proved that a ranked choice system can actually honor complexity without demanding absolute conformity.
It's a testament to the fact that the voting body genuinely could not dismiss either achievement. The technical mastery was just too evenly matched.
But while the directors were executing their grand, overarching visions and splitting the vote, the acting categories were completely unmoored.
Oh, they were wild.
They're delivering wild emotional swings, showcasing the absolute chaos of a career in front of the camera.
Well, the acting awards are the emotional raw nerve of the broadcast. They strip away the intellectualization of the directors and leave us with unfiltered human reaction.
And this year gave us the entire spectrum. So in Best Actor, we saw first-time nominee Michael B. Jordan take the trophy for his role as the twins Smokin' Stackin' Sinners.
Great performance.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Adrian Brody presented the award, doing a fantastic bit mocking his own famously long, gum-chewing speech from his win years ago. And Jordan's speech was pure, unadulterated hunger. He talked about betting on himself. He said, "Thank you for keeping betting on me, and I'm gonna keep stepping up." It was triumphant.
It was.
But then, the broadcast control room makes a choice. They cut immediately to Timothée Chalamet, who was heavily favored to win, and Kylie Jenner sitting beside him. And Chalamet looks devastated. Like, his face is tight, he is barely holding it together.
It is the most brutal convention in television directing, the loser cutaway.
I have a theory about this, and I want you to challenge me if I'm wrong.
Okay, let's hear it.
A lot of critics call that cutaway unethical or unnecessarily cruel.
Yeah.
Like, why put a camera in someone's face at the exact moment their heart breaks? But I argue that the telecast actually needs that cruelty.
Needs it.
Yet the audience demands it as payment. These are untouchable billionaires. We need to see them bleed just a little bit, to see that micro expression of jealousy, to maintain our parasocial relationship with them. If we don't see their disappointment, they stop being human to us.
Well, I wouldn't call you wrong. I would call that the harsh architectural truth of reality television. And the Oscars are a reality show.
Exactly.
The Academy monetizes vulnerability. They invite the most heavily media-trained, perfectly curated humans on Earth, place them in a high-pressure environment, and wait for the facade to crack. The viewers at home tolerate the immense wealth and privilege on display specifically because of the underlying threat of public failure. Chalamet's micro-expression of defeat is the emotional tax he pays for the nomination.
That is a fascinating way to frame it. An emotional tax. And we saw a completely different emotional output in the Best Actress race.
Jessie Buckley.
Yes. Jessie Buckley won for Hamnet. It happened to be Mother's Day in the UK, and her speech was a chaotic, beautiful explosion. She dedicated it to the beautiful chaos of a mother's heart. And then she looks into the lens, calls her husband an incredible dad, and says she wants 20,000 more babies with him.
It was an incredible blurring of the lines between high art and domestic reality.
And then contrast that with Best Supporting Actress. Amy Madigan wins for playing Aunt Gladys in Weapons.
Yeah, a totally different vibe.
Completely. She is 75 years old. This is her first nomination in 40 years, 4 decades between invitations to the party, and she is completely unfazed.
She was great.
She gets to the mic and jokes that she was in the shower shaving her legs, trying to think of what to say, but then realized she was wearing pants, so she didn't have to worry about it. She thanks her husband, Ed Harris. And then, completing the spectrum, Sean Penn wins Best Supporting Actor for One Battle After Another.
Making history himself.
He becomes only the 4th man to win 3 acting Oscars. Kieran Culkin presents the award, but Penn isn't even in the building. He skipped the entire Hollywood award season because he was in Ukraine filming a documentary.
You know, when you look at those 4 wins together, the telecast inadvertently mapped the entire neurological and professional life cycle of an actor.
Explain that. What are the 4 phases we were seeing?
First, you have Michael B. Jordan. This is the ascension phase. He is hungry. He is fueled by the need to prove his commercial viability translates into prestige validation. His speech is all about stepping up.
Yeah.
Second, you have Jessie Buckley in the integration phase. She has achieved the peak of her craft, but she realizes the art is secondary to the life force that fuels at her family. Her joy is wildly present.
Okay, that makes sense.
Third, you have Amy Madigan representing the endurance phase. A 40-year gap teaches an actor that the industry is fickle, trends die, but pure talent survives. Her relaxed demeanor, the joke about shaving her legs, it shows she no longer needs the Academy's validation to know her worth. She simply appreciates the nod.
She's just happy to be there, but she knows who she is.
Exactly. And finally, you have Sean Penn in the transcendence phase. He has won so many times that the physical trophy is meaningless. He has realized the fiction of Hollywood pales in comparison to the geopolitical reality of the world. He removes himself from the ecosystem entirely.
It's like watching the 4 seasons of a creative soul play out over an hour of television.
It really is.
But If the actors showed us the internal chaos of Hollywood, the broadcast itself was about to show us the external, mechanical chaos of live television. Because right in the middle of a massive, historic cultural milestone, the control room violently intervened.
We're talking about the K-pop microphone incident.
Yes.
This is the moment media studies classes will be analyzing for the next 20 years.
It was stunning to watch. The K-pop group Demon Hunters won Best Original Song for their massive viral hit Golden. They also won Best Animated Feature, which is an unbelievable achievement.
Double winners.
Right. But this specific award, Best Song, made them the very first K-pop act to ever win an Oscar. This is a monumental breakthrough for a global music genre, piercing the veil of a rigid Western film institution.
The cultural cachet of that moment is immense. The Academy has been desperate for years to tap into the younger, hyper-engaged global demographic that K-pop commands.
So they invite them. They let them perform Golden live, which gets a massive reaction. By the way, the live music was incredible all night. We had Raphael Sadiq and Ludwig Göransson performing I Lied to You with Shubuzi, Misty Copeland doing ballet, and actors from Sinners on stage.
The performances were top tier.
But then, Demon Hunters win the award.
Yeah.
And because the show is bleeding time, the producers enforce a strict rule. Only one member can speak. E.G. steps to the microphone. He begins a deeply profound speech. He says, "This award is not about success, it's about resilience." And the moment the word resilience leaves his mouth, the microphone literally begins sinking into the floor. The lights go dim, the orchestra swells to play him off.
It was the ruthless algorithmic logic of linear television executing its programming.
Okay, stop right there. Because I want to understand the exact mechanics of why this happened. We live in a streaming era, like podcasts can be 4 hours long and Netflix shows don't have run times. Why does the broadcast truck care so much about 3 extra minutes of a historic speech that they're willing to publicly humiliate a global superstar?
Because the Oscars are not a streaming event. They are a legacy linear television broadcast governed by the brutal economics of advertising contracts and affiliate agreements.
Follow the money.
Always. The network broadcasting the Oscars sells commercial time at exorbitant rates, often based on specific time blocks. More importantly, the national broadcast must eventually hand the feed over to local network affiliates for the late-night local news.
All right.
If the Oscars run 20 minutes late, they delay the local news across the entire country. Local affiliates lose their own advertising revenue, and the national network faces severe financial penalties.
So it's literally a countdown clock to losing money.
Exactly. Inside that broadcast track, the director isn't thinking about the cultural significance of K-pop. They are looking at a digital clock glowing red, and a network executive is screaming in their headset that they are 5 minutes over the hard out. To the control room, E.G. isn't a historical figure. He is an obstacle to hitting a commercial break.
But the irony is staggering. I mean, the Academy clearly only invited Demon Hunters because they wanted the ratings bump from the K-pop army.
Yeah.
They wanted to use the group's global metrics to legitimize the Oscars' relevance to Gen Z.
Yep.
But the moment the group tries to actually take up space to speak their truth, the institution literally pulls the floor out from under them.
It perfectly exposes the transactional nature of Hollywood's embrace of globalism. They want the aesthetic and the viewership of international art, but they are not willing to restructure their rigid institutional frameworks to properly respect it.
And the result was a textbook example of the Streisand effect.
Completely. If the control room had simply let him speak for an extra 30 seconds, the fans would have celebrated a nice speech and the internet would have moved on.
Right.
But by cutting him off precisely as he spoke the word resilience, the broadcast truck inadvertently weaponized his fandom. They visually proved his thesis. They transformed a standard acceptance speech into a viral symbol of institutional disrespect. Millions of fans instantly mobilized online, generating infinitely more negative press for the Academy than a delayed local newscast ever would have.
It shows that you cannot apply 20th century broadcast logic to a 21st century digital culture without it blowing up in your face. But if the mic cut was a calculated, albeit disastrous choice by the control room, what happened next was a pure, unscripted logistical nightmare. The math simply broke.
The rarest phenomenon in the history of the Academy Awards.
We had an exact tie. Kumail Nanjiani comes out to present Best Live Action Short. He opens the envelope, pauses, and announces that there are 2 winners. The film The Singers and the film Two People Exchanging Saliva. This is only the 7th time a tie has happened in almost a century of voting.
The mathematical improbability of this is staggering.
It's like a glitch in the Matrix.
It really is. The Academy has roughly 10,000 voting members. They vote independently, scattered across the globe, using a secure digital system. For two films to receive the exact same number of votes down to the single digit defies statistical logic.
So Nanjiani is on stage, and you can see the panic setting in.
Yeah.
He's trying to manage the room, saying, "Everyone calm down, we're gonna get through this, focus up, remain calm." And then absolute chaos ensues. The first group comes up and gives their speech. As the second group of filmmakers gets to the microphone to speak, the system breaks down again. The microphone starts retracting again. The lights go dark because the show is now catastrophically behind schedule.
I want you to visualize what is happening inside the broadcast truck during those 60 seconds.
Yes, take me into the room. What are they doing?
It is absolute pandemonium. A live television rundown is scripted to the millisecond. Camera 3 takes a wide shot, camera 4 gets the winner's reaction, camera 2 follows them up the stairs. When Nanjiani announces 2 winners, that entire script is instantly shredded.
Oh man.
The technical director is suddenly screaming over the headset to the camera operators, trying to ad-lib blocking for twice as many people rushing the stage.
Like, who are they? Get a shot of the guy in the red tie. No, the other group.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the stage managers in the wings are experiencing a physical crisis. The Academy only places a specific number of Oscar statues on the presenter's tray for each category.
Wait, really?
Yes, so suddenly they need extra physical trophies immediately. You have producers sprinting to the prop vault to find spare statues, and looming over all of this is the broadcast clock. The director knows they just lost an additional 2 to 3 minutes they do not have. That is why the microphone retracted on the second group. It wasn't malice, it was blind panic from a control room in freefall.
But right in the middle of this freefall, the camera cuts to the side of the stage. Conan O'Brien is standing there, watching the chaos unfold. He waits a beat, lets the awkwardness peak, and then seamlessly leans into a microphone and drops the line.
You just ruined 22 million Oscar pools.
That single sentence is the exact reason you hire a veteran late-night host.
It was a perfect shock absorber. It took this bizarre, abstract mathematical anomaly that was making everyone uncomfortable and grounded it in the most relatable, mundane reality possible, the office gambling pool. He gave the audience, and the control room, permission to exhale and laugh at the absurdity of the system breaking down.
He functioned as the emotional anchor for a broadcast that was spinning off its axis.
Now, as the broadcast wrestled with its own logistical realities, the content of the awards forced the audience to confront much harsher global realities. The documentary categories brought the unfiltered, often terrifying state of the world directly onto the Dolby stage.
The documentary branch historically acts as the conscience of the Academy, puncturing the bubble of escapism. And I want to be incredibly clear with you listening before we dissect this. Our job on this deep dive is to examine the broadcast as a cultural artifact. We are reporting strictly on the events as they unfolded, based on the source material provided. We are not endorsing any political ideology, left or right. We are looking at the mechanics of how politics function within an entertainment broadcast.
Impartial analysis is essential to understand the structural role these moments play in the telecast.
Absolutely. So, Best Documentary Feature went to a film called Mr. Nobody Against Putin. The creators took the stage and delivered a stark, urgent speech. They spoke explicitly about the danger of oligarchs taking over independent media, how controlling the flow of information fundamentally rewrites reality, and how that manipulation leads directly to the loss of a nation's sovereignty.
A very heavy message.
Following that, Best Documentary Short went to All the Empty Rooms. And these heavy categories were presented by late-night host Jimmy Kimmel. Kimmel, who famously clashed with Donald Trump publicly the previous summer, used his moment at the podium to take a targeted political jab. He joked, "Oh man, is he going to be mad his wife wasn't nominated for this?" referencing a highly criticized documentary directed by Brett Ratner about Melania Trump. And again, tying back to the real world, Sean Penn's physical absence hung over the room because he was actively in Ukraine filming a documentary about a live war.
It creates a staggering juxtaposition of tone.
That's exactly my question for you. How does a broadcast sustain this kind of tonal whiplash? You have creators giving a literal life or death warning about the collapse of global democracy, sandwiched between a K-pop performance, a 75-year-old woman joking about shaving her legs, and Kimmel taking petty political snipes. Does this dissonance mean the broadcast is failing to control its tone?
No, the dissonance is the entire point. It is not a failure of the broadcast. It is the defining characteristic of the Academy Awards as a cultural institution. Interesting.
When historians look back at the 2026 Oscars 50 years from now, they won't just see who had the best cinematography. They will see a flawless, high-definition snapshot of exactly what Western society was wrestling with.
They will see our terrors and our coping mechanisms side by side.
Precisely. We expect art to serve a singular function, but it doesn't. Art is dual purpose. It reflects our desperate, deeply human need for escapism, which gives us the glittering gowns, the massive musical numbers, the superficial comedy.
Right.
But art is also the primary vehicle through which we confront our most terrifying realities. The documentary filmmakers and figures like Penn represent the grounding wire of the industry. The Oscar stage is simply a magnifying glass for the human condition. We are entirely capable of processing profound grief and acknowledging existential political threats while simultaneously desiring joy, glamour, and distraction. The whiplash isn't a glitch. It is the human experience televised. And speaking of processing profound grief, the broadcast transitioned from the anxieties of the present moment into a deep, heavy reflection on the past. The telecast leaned incredibly hard into nostalgia, paying tribute to the foundational legends who built the industry.
The In Memoriam segment is a staple, but the specific weight of the losses this year forced the producers to architect the entire evening differently.
It hit with a brutal finality. We watched Billy Crystal step up to honor his lifelong friend and collaborator, the legendary director Rob Reiner, who passed away in December. Crystal's tribute was masterful. He said Rob's movies will last for lifetimes because they touch on what makes us laugh, cry, and what we aspire to be. He also took a poignant moment to remember Reiner's wife, Michelle Singer Reiner.
It was very moving.
Then we had Rachel McAdams honoring the comedic brilliance of Catherine O'Hara and Diane Keaton, reflecting on playing Keaton's daughter in The Family Stone. And the final, most devastating blow was Barbra Streisand honoring her. The Way We Were co-star, Robert Redford.
That was the emotional peak of the night.
She was visibly struggling to hold back tears. She called him an intellectual cowboy who blazed his own trail, and then she softly, mournfully sang a few lines from the movie. Watching it, I felt a distinct panic in the room. It felt like the industry was realizing that the structural bedrock of modern Hollywood was crumbling.
You are observing the psychological terror of an industry losing its monoculture.
Explain that. What do you mean by monoculture?
Robert Redford, Diane Keaton, Rob Reiner. These artists emerged during the new Hollywood movement of the 1970s and 80s. They operated in an era of monoculture where a single film could captivate the entire nation simultaneously.
Because there were fewer options.
Exactly. They weren't just famous, they were shared cultural touchstones. In today's fragmented, algorithm-driven streaming landscape, achieving that level of universal, enduring resonance is nearly impossible. When Streisand mourns Redford, she isn't just mourning a friend. The industry is mourning an era of undisputed cinematic supremacy that they know they can never recreate.
But the producers of the telecast understood how heavy that realization was, because they didn't just leave the audience wallowing in that grief. They strategically seeded reunions and nostalgia acts throughout the rest of the 3-hour runtime as a counterbalance.
It is a calculated technique of emotional pacing.
Right. We saw Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. reunite to present the Screenplay Awards. Downey Jr. brought a sequined thong from Magic Mike and gave it to Evans, prompting Channing Tatum to yell from the audience that he needed it back.
That was a great moment of levity.
We had the cast of the 2011 comedy Bridesmaids, Melissa McCarthy, Rose Byrne, Kristen Wiig, Maya Rudolph, and Ellie Kemper, celebrating the film's 15th anniversary by pretending they shot the movie in the 1800s. We saw Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman together again for the 25th anniversary of Moulin Rouge. We even had Anne Hathaway and Anna Wintour presenting together, heavily teasing a sequel to The Devil Wears Prada.
Look at the demographics of the people they brought out for those reunions.
It's all the stars from the 2000s and 2010s.
Exactly. When an industry is panicked about losing its foundational titans, how does it reassure its investors and its audience? It showcases its bench strength.
Oh, wow.
The telecast intentionally juxtaposed the grief of the In Memoriam with the undeniable star power of the generation that followed, bringing out Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, the architects of the multi-billion-dollar Marvel era, or the cast of Bridesmaids, the defining comedic voices of a decade, serves a specific neurological function for the viewer.
It tells them the factory is still working.
Yes, it is a visual passing of the torch. It assures the audience that while we have lost irreplaceable giants like Redford and Keaton, the mechanisms of Hollywood are still capable of producing icons who can command a room and hold our collective attention. It transforms a broadcast defined by mourning into an assertion of institutional continuity.
It is a brilliant, subtle manipulation of the audience's anxiety. Wow. When you lay it all out like that, the 98th Academy Awards was an absolutely exhausting, historically dense piece of television. Let's trace the arc of what we just unpacked.
We witnessed the slow, grinding wheels of industry justice finally turning.
We saw the invisible art of casting finally validated, with Cassandra Koulikounias bringing a grueling 30-year partnership with Paul Thomas Anderson to the main stage. We saw Autumn Durald Arkapaw shatter a century-old celluloid ceiling in the camera department, forcing the systemic biases of the industry into the light by making the women in the room physically stand.
We watched two architectural philosophies of cinema collide in Sinners, and one battle after another, proving that a preferential ballot can actually honor complexity without demanding a singular winner.
We analyzed the brutal economics of linear television that silenced a historic K-pop milestone, inadvertently proving the very point of the speech. And we went inside the panicked control room during a mathematical anomaly, a true live-action short tie, saved only by the shock-absorbing wit of Conan O'Brien.
It was a night that laid bare the internal mechanisms, the biases, and the shifting future of global entertainment.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. If you take anything away from this, I hope it is the realization that a 30-second viral clip of a celebrity crying or a microphone cutting out is never just a random event. It is the result of decades of union history, complex voting mathematics, brutal broadcast economics, and incredibly raw human ambition operating right beneath the surface. The next time you watch an awards show, look past the red carpet and look at the architecture.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to consider. Tonight, we saw the first Oscar awarded for casting. We saw global K-pop force its way into the Dolby Theater. We saw documentaries acting as real-time journalism for global wars.
Right.
The definition of what constitutes an Oscar-winning film or an Oscar-worthy artist is expanding more rapidly today than at any point in the Academy's history. As this institution marches toward its 100th anniversary in just 2 years, we have to ask a critical question. Are the Oscars finally catching up to the realities of the real world? Or is the sheer, undeniable force of global culture simply holding a gun to the Academy's head, compelling them to evolve or face total irrelevance?
That is the ultimate question of survival.
The next time you sit in a dark theater and the credits roll, don't just stop at the director or the lead actor. Look at the hundreds of names scrolling by in the technical departments, the rigging crews, the coordinators. Ask yourself, who are the invisible artists behind the camera that this industry is still refusing to give a trophy to? What other barriers are just waiting for someone to force the room to stand up?
I love that because at the end of the day, a massive live broadcast isn't a perfectly predictable machine. It is a terrifying, high-wire act performed by passionate, messy human beings trying to capture lighting in a bottle. And sometimes, the true art is revealed only when the machine breaks down. Thanks for diving deep with us. See you next time.